Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Virtual Connections, Best Practices in Online Museum Education. We're going to give everybody just a minute or so to get settled into this morning's session. While you're waiting, please feel free to drop your name, your organization, and where you're coming from into the chat, and we'll get started very soon. Hi, everyone. Welcome to Virtual Connections, Best Practices in Online Museum Education. We're going to give everybody about 10-15 more seconds to get settled into today's session. And if you haven't already done so, please feel free to introduce yourself in the chat, and we'll get started very soon. All right, I think we're going to get started. So again, everyone, thank you so much for coming to Virtual Connections, Best Practices in Online Museum Education. My name is Amanda Goodheart Parks. I'm the Director of Education at the New England Air Museum in Windsor Locks, Connecticut. I am also a co-chair for the NEMA Education Professional Affinity Gathering. So on behalf of myself and all of our wonderful panelists, thank you so much for joining us. And I'm very happy to be here with my fabulous co-chair and co-facilitator, Erin.
Hi, everyone. I'm Erin Wederbrook Yuskaitis with Yellow Room Consulting. Delighted to be here today as well. We've got a really great lineup. Amanda is going to give you the framework for how the session is going to work, and then we'll have plenty of time to chat and ask questions at the end.
Great. Thanks, Erin. So I think it's pretty much the understatement of the century to say that museum educators have been through a lot in the last 9 months. Everything from furloughs and closures, layoffs, financial constraints, burnout, pressures, uncertainty, and above all, this constant, never-ending challenge of pivoting, right? That's everybody's new favorite word right now. So for many of us over the last 9 months, pivoting in COVID-19 has meant shifting our programs from in-person to virtual. And in most cases, those pivots were done swiftly on a shoestring budget and with very little time for preparation or planning. So today's presenters have been through those trenches, right? They have gone through all the same issues that we have all felt and dealt with over the last 9 months, and yet they have risen to the challenge of this pivot to virtual museum education. They were all handpicked by Erin and myself because of the innovative and groundbreaking work that they have done and are continuing to still do in virtual museum education, and we are extremely grateful for their willingness to share their experiences with you all today. So a little bit of housekeeping. Each of our presenters is going to discuss a specific area of virtual museum education, either field trips, adult programs, family programs, or special events. They will each speak for about 15 minutes or so before we shift to extensive time for Q&A at the end of the session. But don't feel like you have to wait until the end of the session to type your questions into the Q&A box on the right side of your screen. If a question comes up while they're presenting, please feel free to type it in. Erin and I will be moderating the Q&A, and we'll make sure that we get to as many questions as possible. We don't recommend putting questions into the chat as they have a tendency of getting lost that way. So with no further ado, I would love for our fantastic panelists to introduce themselves, and let's start with Frank Clark.
Good morning, everybody. Hi, I'm Frank Clark. I am a park ranger at Lowell National Historical Park, and I also work with the Songus Industrial History Center, and we do lots of programs and have been doing programs for 20-odd years in Lowell, Massachusetts on all things having to do with Lowell, the mills, and the stories there. And as everyone is here we're adapting to a new world.
Excellent. Thanks so much, Frank. Could Rachel and Tasha introduce themselves?
Hi, everyone. My name is Tasha Smith. I am the manager of public programs for the Mattituck Museum located in Waterbury, Connecticut.
I'm the director of education at the Mattituck Museum.
Hey, Rachel, could you try that again? And we couldn't hear you all that well.
Can you hear me better now?
Yes.
Okay. Sorry about that. My name is Rachel Panassi Lima, and I'm the Director of Education at the Mattituck Museum.
Excellent. Thank you, ladies. Tracy.
Hi, everyone. I'm Tracy Limbo, and I'm the Manager of Education Services at the Metropolitan Waterworks Museum in Massachusetts.
Thank you, Tracy. And last but not least, Jenny.
Hi, I'm Jenny Powers. I'm the Family Engagement Coordinator at Springfield Museums in Springfield, Massachusetts.
Excellent. Great. Thank you so much, panelists. So before we begin everyone's formal presentations, we want to get a better sense of who is here because, of course, we're speaking into a void right now. And we would love, as museum educators, to know our audience. So we know this platform isn't exactly conducive to the type of conversation that we all like to have at conference. So I'm going to ask a series of 3 questions. And if you could just put your responses into the chats, that would be great. So question number 1, pre-2020, did your museum offer virtual educational programming? Yes or no? So pre-2020, pre-pandemic, did you offer virtual museum education programming? Yes or no? Erin, why don't you tell me how the chat's looking?
So far, I'm seeing only no's. All no's.
Awesome, great.
I've seen 1 yes. Okay.
1 yes. Okay, so that person's going to be the expert in the Q&A section. That's great. Okay, so question number 2. Since COVID, so February, March 2020 to now, have you pivoted to offering virtual museum education? If so, describe that experience in 5 words or less. If not, sum up why not in 5 words or less. So again, since COVID, have you pivoted to online programming? If so, describe it in 5 words or less. And if not, describe why not in 5 words or less.
Seeing a mix of yes and no so far. I think people are thinking about their 5 words. I'm seeing online lessons, programs on Zoom. We've lost some staff. Yes, but not experimental or explorative enough. Recorded field trips, pre-recorded and live programs, beefing up pre-existing content, games, pre-teaching, feedback, social media, live stream, pre-recorded.
Excellent. Okay.
Art classes. Yeah, we're seeing a lot.
That's great. So we're seeing, it looks like a lot of pivots have happened and they've taken a lot of different forms, which is great. Okay. Last question before we get started. What is your primary goal for attending this session today? Drop that answer in the chat. So what is your goal? Why are you here today? Erin, I see you smiling.
Yeah, I'm just thinking people are probably just, okay. All right, fresh ideas, new ideas, access consideration, hearing about techniques and challenges, more about virtual school programs, looking at other people's content, hearing what has worked and what hasn't, practical, applicable tips, ideas,
Awesome.
Moving beyond the virtual lecture. Learn from others, learn from others. So we're really getting a sense of people wanting to hear from our panelists. So that's great. And we do plan to, all of the speakers have some tips and advice for all of you, as well as what did not work. So we'll hear all of those juicy things. Yeah, that seems to be the consensus.
Awesome, great. All right, so now that our panelists know a little bit more about you and we have a better sense of what you're looking for today, we're gonna pass it over to our first presenter, Frank Clark at Songus Industrial History Center. Frank, it's all you.
All right, thanks. Let me pull up the screen. All right, everybody. So as I said before, I work at the Songus Industrial History Center in Lowell. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about our story here in the wonderful world of 2020. So first of all, just a little bit about who we are. If you don't know already, you're looking at lovely picture of the Boot Cotton Mills. That's where I work here in Lowell, in one of the old mill buildings. We're lucky that we have mill buildings and other resources that we use here, and we do a lot of different programs based on that over the years. So we are based in Lowell Mills. We have always been based around a hands-on, place-based education program, and what that basically means is that people who arrive at our place traditionally have always had a combination of visiting our historic resources, whether that's a museum or a trolley or artifacts or other kinds of things, and also in addition to that, doing a hands-on workshop. So we have workshop spaces, and that's primarily what our education programs have been. We do a lot of programs. We do 40, 50,000 kids a year in a good year. That number obviously goes up or down depending on what's going on. And we cover a lot of different themes related to our story in Lowell. So we cover things that have to do with the Industrial Revolution, including the technical side of things like water power or building or technology or engineering. People's stories like who are the immigrants, who are the mill girls that came here to work, why did they come, where are they going, what was the change going on, and work, everything from assembly line work to strikes to covering things like how does this connect to enslaved people and things like that. And also the environmental effects of all of this industrialization. So lots of different topics that we try to cover. And it's, like I said, all built around place-based group work, hands-on, experiential sort of things. And I'm sort of telling you all this to kind of lay the groundwork for what's coming next as we go into our story. So what happens this spring? Well, we were doing 10 to 15 groups a day, and then all of a sudden in 1 week in March, it all came crashing to a stop. I'm sure it's a story that everybody here knows. As we were going, I mean, I'm sure that you all have the same experiences. We were going along, everything seemed to be good. People in news are coming in and we're like going, oh, that's interesting. What's going to happen? Oh, a school doesn't want to come tomorrow. Okay. Oh, look, two don't want to come the next day. And then all of a sudden, everything comes to a crashing stop. So yeah, as I said, 10, 15 groups a day, all stops all at once. We are lucky in some ways here in Lowell that people like myself and a few other people are year-round staff who work for the National Park, and we also do this. But most of our staff are actually part-time educators who work through the university, through the Songs Industrial History Center. And so they all said, bye. We're going to miss you, and hopefully you'll be back soon. I'm sure this is a common story for many people. In addition, we also had to plan our summer that was coming up. That meant teacher workshops that had already been planned through the National Endowment of Humanities and other places. And that was another guessing game. Are we going to go? Are we not going to go? How long is this going to last? And then it eventually gets closed down. So it was a rough few weeks. And then we were all sent home and said, you can't work here. And so we were trying to play around and figure out what's going on in the summer, what's going on then, and more importantly, what's going to happen in September when school comes back again. And as I'm sure all of you realize, there's a lot of questions. What do we do? Where does it go? How do we do this? We had prided ourselves for 20 odd years of being a place where groups of kids came and hung out, and we got up close and personal with them as they were weaving on looms and working on assembly lines. And all of a sudden, our bread and butter seems to be something we can't do. And on top of that, the buildings that we work in, they say, hey, you can't come into them anymore because there's not enough space here and things like that. So what do we do? So we're trying to figure this out. So what we did is what normal people would do was we looked at the research, and we went around and what do teachers want? We started talking to local teachers. We talked to community people. We went online. We talked to as many groups as we could get connected to, try to find out. And of course, at the same time, all of those teachers are going through the same thing. What do we do? Where do we go? How do I figure this out? How do I do all this stuff? And then the same questions, right? So we're talking to others, museums. We're looking things up. What are they doing? What are they charging? Is it free? Is it different? Is it, how does it work? What technology do we use? We know there's a ton of different technology things out there. What are we going to use? Is it live? Is it synchronous? Is it asynchronous? We'd already been doing some things digitally. We already had some resources online. We already had things for people to choose, but that didn't really seem to be it. So where are we going to go from here? All right, we want to try to do something. We're trying to preserve what it is that we think makes our field trip so special, or any field trip special, really. You know, it's engaging, it's interactive, it's student focused, it's focused on our themes, on the frameworks that the kids are working with, making the day a special day, making it something different, you know. Normally we would try to do that by bringing them someplace where they've never been before. Well, how are we going to do that from a distance? How do we get at that process? And meant we really had to think a little bit. You know, can we do what we want to do? Can we get out of the mold of saying we can't do it, so we just got to give up? Yeah, sure, we're going to move on. So we're going to plan, we're going to develop. And this is kind of where we go. We went in two routes initially. One route is developing live virtual field trips. The other route is what we were referring to as our remote modules. Remote modules are more of a collection of things. It could be video, it could be text, it could be graphics, it could be all these things basically packaged up in like a Google Classroom mode so that teachers can access it, and we could add on little questions for them to answer, things like that. And we've begun working on some of those remote modules, but most of what we've been doing most recently has been developing our virtual field trips. And that's where we're going to focus right now. On screen here, I have some pictures of some of us here working on our virtual field trips. And I'm going to get into this a little bit, but a couple of points that I want to point out of what we're trying to do. One is try as much as possible to integrate the things that are what we consider the LOL things into something that the kids or the students or the adults or whoever is on the other end of the line can still access. Some of that's going to be through pre-recorded video. You can perhaps see that we have a picture here of somebody recording somebody dressed up as a mill girl working at a loom. But a lot of it we decided was going to be done live. And we approached it in a multi-modal sort of team approach. For us, it means that we have two different presenters for each program. And in some cases, it means that somebody is in a building with a camera actually showing stuff. But we're going to be, we went with two people for a couple of reasons. One is to add variety to the students so they hear a couple of different voices, make it a little bit more conversational, let you have the ability to do what Erin and Amanda are doing here, which is read the chats and see what's going on. And as we all probably know by now, if you're looking at a Zoom you know, Brady Bunch kind of window there, it's hard to see all of the different people that are there and see what their reactions are and even notice when the hands go up, that sort of thing. So two people do it. For a while, we kind of likened it to the two different people like covering a baseball game or a football game or something like that, where you have, you know, the person doing play-by-play and the person doing the color commentary, and you'd have a couple of different ways. It works for us. It seems pretty good. So let me just show you a little bit about this. But before I do, I just want to point out that none of this came easy. Even we approached it in several cases as adapting existing programs, things that we already did, things that we already knew, you know, we thought worked. And still, I think we have one that's based on immigration. I think they're on version 19 at the moment of different versions of this, where you try it out, it lands, it doesn't land. And the biggest thing that we have, and I'm sure that most of you have this, I heard some of the comments earlier, is avoiding talking. It is so hard when you're here with the, you know, microphone and the camera to not just talk. And we've been constantly trying to pull back and pull back and pull back to give, to do two things really. One is to give the students at the other end something to do, which might be a physical thing to do. It might be something to react to. It might be some kind of different thing that we're asking them to look at or think about. And the other thing we want to do is pause, and lots of dead space really as you're waiting, because the delay of between when you ask and when they can type it into the chat is a lot longer than we all expected. So the first program we kind of developed is what we refer to as Mill Girls, Life and Work in an Industrial City. Many people for years and years, whenever they talked about Lowell, that's what they always thought about, was Mill Girls. And so we wanted something that we thought got to the core. The three pictures that I put up on the screen here are three different things that I wanted to kind of show you. The picture on the sort of the left-hand side here of the woman in the skirt is, as I said, a pre-recorded video. What we did is we recorded a couple of different people talking about life working in a mill, so that when we're trying to show the students, we can have them essentially seeing something different. I will warn people that over Zoom, over internet, through 20 kids in their homes, and not knowing what the bandwidth situation is going to be, video can be tricky. You know, we're noticing that sometimes it's a little bit glitchy, it's a little bit slow, laggy, things like that. Kids will say, it's lagging again. And we also noticed the same way that we wanted kids to be able to unmute and talk to us. And sometimes the system doesn't allow that. So we have to kind of work with that. Anyway, so we're showing a couple of videos and then asking the kids, either asking them to chat or even respond to polls, things like that. In the middle of the screen, we have a picture here of a farm image. And we're using this in a sort of modified VTS, if you ever done visual thinking strategies. But asking the kids, what do you see here? And we would do that early on in the talk to get them thinking about what was life for the person who left this farm. What was their life like and then came to the city? To kind of think there. Our goal for this program is to get at least 4th grade, 5th grade kids to be thinking about, what would you think about having to work in the city? So the third one on the right, with our friend with the oh so fancy looking mustache on there, is a little physical activity that we have the kids do, where they're actually supposed to stand up, and he's you can see the little motion there with his hands. He's doing an activity where they're pretending that they're part of the machine going back and forth. They're like a shuttle on a machine going back and forth. And then he runs them through. You got to go faster. I'm going to cut your pay, and do all these things to go through all these steps, and then ask the kids, you know, what do you think? So we're trying to do lots of different kinds of short things during the program, each time getting them to see something, react to something, do something along the way. Our second one here, a similar kind of thing. This one's about immigration, and we're asking them to do a couple of things. On the left-hand side, we ask, what is the immigrant getting used to? What we've done is we've supplied them with a link to some short biographies of 7 different people who have come from different countries over time to Lowell, and they're asked to read a little segment of that and then respond. What were they getting used to? What do they feel like? Why did they come here? Things like that. Again, we're using chat and we're using polls and different kinds of things. In this particular case, we also will break them into small breakout groups and send them into these breakout groups to talk. So we're doing lots of things, different kinds of things within Zoom to get them to think about what we're doing. We're also trying to use things like maps and other kinds of visual thinking to get them to think about stories in relation. And we are showing them objects. We're trying to bring this to a physical level of thinking about cultures and immigration. In this case, the small object there is a Greek. I'm going to Prospero. It's a basically a press that you would use to imprint onto bread dough to cook for communion in a Greek ceremony. So we're showing them that, asking them what they think about that, remind them anything. And then we use a little bit of Play-Doh just to kind of show them how it works, because they don't quite get that. We show them a few other artifacts as well. Again, we're looking at 45-minute programs. We're looking at moving it along consistently. Third one is just getting underway. That's me. And our water room activity. This is one that we were trying to attempt to bring as much of a living regular program into a non-physical way. The objects you see probably look really strange to you because you're out of context, but what we're doing is showing them building a model of a canal system and testing water wheels. The image on the far right on my screen here is me standing by one of the water wheels where we're asking them to watch as I turn on the water, and then we run through a little test where we see how much force it takes to stop the water moving. We're going to ask them to look at that, to make some judgments about a couple of different things. And then, of course, we are also building a canal, and I'm doing a couple other activities. So this one, again, lots of little things. So what have we kind of taken out of all of this? One thing we've all taken is it's great to be able to work with students again. We've all missed it. We like that. And I think that the kids and the students really like to have the break of having something to do. It takes a long time to get it right. It takes effort, it takes work. You really got to focus and think about what works. Leave time for the kids to actually do things, but keep the sections really short. The attention span on Zoom is really small. Be ready for glitches. I'm sure by now everybody knows that. If it's going to go wrong, it's going to go wrong. Be ready for it and figure out what your backup's going to be. And last but not least, we've discovered that this is a great way to reach new audiences, not just the people who normally all come here, but people coming from lots of different places. We had a library from Indiana the other day. We've had people from Wisconsin and Michigan and Illinois and all kinds of places coming. So that's what I got, and I'm all done. And I'm going to turn things back to you, Amanda.
Great. Thank you so much, Frank. I know that was hugely beneficial for me, and I'm sure it was very beneficial for everybody else, talking about how you and your colleagues have basically reinvented the field trip for a virtual platform. So thank you very much. Next up on our presenter agenda are the wonderful ladies from the Mattituck Museum. So I'm going to turn it over to Tasha and Rachel.
Hi again, everyone. Just going to share my screen quick. I'm trying to my volume so I can hear better. Okay, so for those of you who don't know the Mattituck Museum, as Tasha said earlier, we're located in Waterbury, Connecticut, and we are an art and history museum, and we mainly focus on interpreting the history of the greater Waterbury area or the Naugatuck Valley, but we also interpret the history and collect art from Connecticut and also New England as well. We're going to be talking a little bit about our adult programming today. And before I pass that off to Tasha to go more in depth on the different types of adult programs we've been doing, just to give you an idea of our situation pre-COVID and post-COVID. Just like everyone else, we closed mid-March and we stayed closed until June 22nd. When we came back, we were doing a mix of some people working in office, some people working remotely, but there was an area before COVID quick grants started coming out where employees were furloughed for 1 day a week to kind of make sure that the museum would stay in an okay position. Obviously, just like everyone else, we've been focusing on our pivot to virtual, but we also are in this unique position where our main museum space is under construction. So on the left there, you can see the construction going on at the main museum. So for pretty much this entire year, we were planning for our numbers to be smaller than what they typically would be. We are currently located in this building on the right here. And right now we're gearing up to move back into our completed space. And so we're really worried about what that grand opening is going to look like, because we were expecting to kind of have a rise in numbers next early spring when we open back up, and we have an exhibition that we're really excited for. So we were kind of planning for smaller numbers, smaller income at this point, but now as we move to the forward, we're really worried about that. Our initial pivot to virtual happened pretty early on. I was brought on to the museum in May, and my focus was mainly going to be continuing our virtual efforts, including social media and the Mat at Home, which I'll talk about, but also figuring out our school tours. And also looking at the public programs that we had planned for in person, and then transitioning those to being virtual offerings. So our initial pivot, though, to virtual was informed by a series of 3 surveys that we sent out, first to our members, to the teachers that we work with in the Waterbury Public Schools every year, and then to the general public. What were they looking for from the museum during this period? When we opened back up in June, would they be comfortable to visit? What measures would the museum have to take to make sure that they felt comfortable? We also took on social media as one of our more pressing responsibilities. Prior to COVID, we did not have a huge social media presence. We would post events, but now we really wanted to engage people with the museum and kind of continue that rapport with the public while our doors were closed. So we did a couple of things, like in the top left-hand corner, you can see the emoji horse with the carriage. If people commented an emoji, we would go through a collection and find a historical object or a work of art that correlated to the emoji that they sent us. And we also took on the Mat at Home and really pushed that on social media. We developed teacher lesson plans, family activities, a whole bunch of different things for people to do based on those surveys that we received. And then the first fully virtual program that we developed specifically in response to COVID, rather than just kind of transitioning to a virtual offering, were these in the artist studios tours that we did with Connecticut artists, where we set up a live stream via Zoom, and the artists would take us through their studio, their workspace, talk about their process, and also reflect on the impact of COVID on their work and what they were looking to create moving forward and how they were going to reach the public. And that was something that we offered specifically to members of the museum. Then in August, Tasha was brought on, and she quickly took over our public programs. And we've been thinking about, obviously, the impacts of COVID, but just what is the museum's programming going to look like in the future as well. So now I will pass it off to her.
Thank you, Rachel.
Wait.
There we go. There we go. Sorry about that. Thank you, Rachel. As Rachel said, I was brought on in August to pick up the virtual programs that were already started, and also to create new virtual programs. So I'm going to talk about a little bit of both ones that were done before and ones that I've created now. So looking at the picture with this nice man here with the painting, this is David. He is our visitor service associate. And one of the things that was created for COVID, which I see as a success with COVID and the switch to virtual, is being able to create new content and being able to try new things. So one of the things we tried was doing a virtual paint night. And this was great, especially the first time around. It also shows the ability to adapt to challenges. So the first time around, David just had one video camera that was set on him. But then he expanded the idea and actually used 2 video cameras the next time around. And again, this allowed for that still kind of that in-person personal connection with the participants. So he had one on him and one that was mainly on the painting. So the participants could see him talk, but also still see him draw at the same time. Another program that was created because of COVID was Mindfulness with Ranji. He's a great volunteer of the museum who also does mindfulness. and he volunteered to expand these mindfulness to everyone. And they're free, which is really great. And it was looked at as a way to combat the stressfulness of COVID. And so we started this up. It took a little break, and we started it up again in November. And it's been really great so far. Again, with the mindfulness sessions, one of the struggles is, getting the word out there and keeping the word out there. But we're trying to do that, and also trying new things. One thing that we have coming up in December is mindfulness for kids. So one of the things we're looking at is how to continue to advertise virtually, how to continue to spread the word of this, especially for all our programs. One thing that I think might be the same for all of us is the switch for lectures to virtual have been relatively easy. It still comes with its challenges of the lecturer doesn't know how to use Zoom. Then you have to step in, teach them how to use Zoom. But one of the great things of trying to combat that challenges that we've been doing is doing practice sessions with our lecturers. We use Zoom as our platform, and we use webinars when it comes to our lectures, and the webinars allow for you to do practice sessions. So we've been really honing in on that to allow for a seamless lecture for our lecturers and having it easy for us to present as well. One of the main challenges that I've seen with transitioning to virtual is losing that hands-on experience. Talking about our women's suffrage, we had an event called Suffragettes and Corselettes, and these two women, they like to do a lot of hands-on components, but we quickly realized that that wasn't going to be successful, since because of the recommendations to combat COVID, hands-on has been very hard to do. We've been trying to still try to keep that component by doing other ways to do hands-on virtually. I did one event with a man who did a hands-on component where he would put up a painting and people would draw, like freehand the painting themselves. And we'll talk about like the colors and stuff, and still have that hands-on component, but all individually. Even though I've been talking about our virtual programs, we still did keep hybrid learning as an option too. And that's something I definitely want to continue into 2021, even after COVID might not be as a pressing matter, because this really allowed for us to connect with people outside of the state of Connecticut. We've had people from DC, people from Ohio, people from Maine, people from Massachusetts joining our conversations during our lectures and events. So it's definitely something that we're looking into, to still keep doing as we transition into 2021. So we can go to the next slide. So next I want to talk about Mad at Night. Mad at Night is a great program, usually pushed by our development team, and it's really focused on young adults, older adults as well, and giving them hands-on ways and experiences in the museum. So trying to get young adults into the museum. This, of course, had to be shifted to virtual. One of the first things that they did was murder mystery. And that became a completely virtual event that people could join in, and they had such a great success with that, that they continue to offer it up. So one of the things that they did was scavenger hunts and Halloween trivia night. And even though these were meant specifically for adults, it did kind of open up to families, again, giving people ways to still interact with us and have a way to still have fun and a way to interact with art as well. Interacting with art and having fun can really be seen in the escape room that was created. So we were really looking at innovative ways to still keep people engaged and have them still see our art, and especially going with the idea of connecting with people outside of the state. One of the biggest challenges, of course, with doing virtual events is technology always doesn't work out so well. So doing a lot of test runs, we did a lot of test runs, especially with the escape room, getting people to come in and test it out for us. Another big challenge is with escape rooms is that they're usually in person, and they really focus on the core idea of working together and having fun. So that was one of the challenges that we had to refocus, is how to keep this idea of the escape room of working together to accomplish a goal still in this virtual component. And that ended up looking like a virtual escape room where participants had to escape a series of paintings that of course are located in our museum. And afterwards we talked about once people escaped, or if they didn't escape, we still show them the paintings, which ones are on display, which ones they can see if they ever come to visit us. That's something I can talk about a little bit more later if anyone has any questions on virtual escape rooms. But continuing forward to our next slide, one thing I want to talk about is the new virtual future that's ahead of us. Something that I talked about before is that with our hybrid model, I don't see virtual leaving us anytime soon. So challenges that we're looking at are how long will adults be interested in virtual learning, because virtual fatigue is becoming a very pressing matter with a lot of museums and even other virtual components and events that I've been seeing. Also, when is the right time to switch to in-person or continue hybrid models? We don't know the future, so that's one of the biggest struggles. But kind of going into best practices and advice, one thing that I advise is plan early and plan for different scenarios. As I've been contacting artists, teaching artists, lecturers, community members, different people to get these events up and going for 2021, I give them different scenarios. I would love for this to be virtual, but it could switch to in-person depending on the situation. Or I would love for this event to be in person, but it can switch to virtual. And it's been great with the different responses of that. One of the other challenges is keeping and generating interest for virtual programs. So that's something that we're still trying to combat and keep going. So we've, again, been trying to do different ways to get people going. So one of the things we tried is cocktail and cubism and cocktails. We invited a mixologist to come in and work with one of our staff members to talk about cubism. And he he looked at time period appropriate drinks that people could make themselves. So it's really interesting too, and seeing people making their own drinks and combining fun and looking at art, and also combining that idea of a lecture and a fun component. Because I know virtual lectures have been the norm, but trying to put a twist on them in some type of way. Also, we have another escape room coming up, which is a winter wonderland escape room. So again, trying to do new and different ways to engage people with our artwork, with our events, and also trying to gain a wider audience. The last thing, or two last things I would like to say, is continue to plan and reassess, and then reassess what we've already reassessed. That's something that we've been doing with our other programs, celebrating holiday traditions. It was planned before COVID as an in-person event, but because of what's been happening, we had to change that. So Rachel and I reassessed that plan, and we are again reassessing what we are reassessed because of the different changes, and you never know how COVID might be. So we're still working on the best ways to do this program while keeping everyone and ourselves safe. And last thing is, what I've been seeing is that people have been really patient with us, especially with changes that we've been making. So also be patient with yourselves. This is definitely a difficult time. I too find myself saying, oh my gosh, this is not going the way I wanted it whatsoever. But I do take a step back and say, well, I'm so happy when people say, well, thank you for doing this program, doing this event for us, even though everything that's happening. So remember to be patient with yourself and just continue to put your best foot forward. And again, try new things and hope for the best. So with that, thank you for listening to us.
Excellent. Thank you so much, ladies. That was fantastic. I think you're going to get a lot of people signing up for Cubism and Cocktails. So yeah, I definitely want to jump in on that event. That was great. So next up on our fantastic panel is Tracy from the Metropolitan Waterworks Museum, and she's going to talk about how she has fully transformed her family program. So take it away, Tracy.
Okay. All right. Well, hello, everyone. I'm Tracy Limbo, and I'm the Manager of Education Services at the Metropolitan Waterworks Museum. And as Amanda said, I'm going to be talking to you about our virtual family programs. So the Waterworks Museum is a small nonprofit museum. We're just on the outskirts of Boston in Chestnut Hill. We are housed in the former high service water pumping station for Boston. So we interpret the stories of the birth and expansion of the public water system and try to connect those stories to present water issues and future concerns. So before the pandemic, we did have a number of existing family programs. Kind of the jewel in the crown was our preschool summer series, which we had actually piloted in 2019. I had done it in some previous positions with the National Park Service, but this was the first time doing it here at the Waterworks Museum. These consisted of 7 unique sessions, and they were 45 minutes long and consisted of a story time, an activity, and a craft. And so these sessions were very popular. We had about, for us, 300 people over the course of the 7 sessions over the summer. And that does include adults, because a lot of the times the adults are having just as much, if not more fun than the kids. So we also had some seasonal workshops. These would usually be during the student break periods, winter break, April break, February break, and also over holidays, you know, Halloween, World Water Day, and things like that. Those we would usually see anywhere between 50 and a couple hundred kids coming to these workshops. And all of these programs, including the preschool, were free with a suggested donation of between $3 and $5. So for staffing for these programs, the whole museum, as I said, we are small, had 3 full-time staff, including myself, and 3 part-time staff, as well as a core of about 30 volunteers. Then and now I am the only dedicated education staff member. And unfortunately, due to COVID, we are now down to 2 full-time and 2 part-time staff, and most of our volunteers are not currently active. As far as budgeting is concerned, the education budget is usually about between $4,000 and $5,000, and that covers school programs and family and community programs. So, of course, we know in March, things changed. We started pivoting to virtual. We actually were able to do it fairly quickly. We started our initial virtual offerings on social media. So we were doing weekly live stream tours on Facebook, where we would click through a kind of walkthrough of the museum while a guide, usually me, would be giving our standard tour and then be able to answer questions in real time. And then we also, I created these Try It Tuesday videos where it would just be a video between 2 and 6 minutes where I would share a quick STEM lesson and then either guide the kids through some sort of engineering activity or give them a design challenge to try at home. And then finally, we were just really increasing the number of posts that we had across all platforms and trying to make them more interactive. So things like polls, trivia questions, and then providing activity and coloring sheets that people could print out and do at home. So around April, as I'm sure most of you experienced, pretty much everything was canceled, except for us. One solitary field trip said, hey, can we try doing something virtual? And I was a little worried at first because I had never done virtual programming, but after transitioning that program and seeing that it was very successful, I thought, all right, let's do it. So the next logical step with the summer approaching was to attack the preschool programs. So unfortunately, we did have to drop some of the programs. As I said earlier, we had 7 sessions, but some of them were too hands-on, which before the pandemic, I'm sure no educator would have ever thought a program could be too hands-on, but that is a thing now. And of course, some of the programs had use of some uncommon materials. So for instance, we have a program where the kids all paint small flower pots. We don't have small flower pots at home, so we're not going to do that program. Another thing to consider when I was adapting these programs was attention span. I recently attended a conference where they were talking about a study that showed that the average attention span of an adult on a Zoom call is about 9 minutes. So kudos to those of you still listening. And the kids' average attention span in person is typically the kid's age times 3 minutes. And that's, again, that's live. So I'm sure, again, it's less for Zoom. If anybody knows a staff for that, that would be very interesting. But given all that, it was really important to me that the programs remained interactive. So I decided to keep the same format, that story time, activity, and craft, 45 minutes. I did have to simplify some of the materials. So for example, when they came to the museum, in one of the programs, we would make a water cycle spinner, but usually we attach that spinner with a brass fastener or a brad, and people don't tend to have those at home. So I had to think, okay, maybe they could use a paper clip. Maybe they can roll up a piece of paper really tightly and use that as an anchor for their spinner. So just kind of coming up with some backup plans if people don't have the materials, and then having, trying to pare it down and make the materials as basic as possible. And the other thing that was really important to consider was, being as detailed as possible upfront when describing the program for people, so they know what they're getting into, and most importantly, that they know what they're going to need. Because sometimes folks can show up to a program and they don't have any of the stuff ready, but if it's simple enough materials, then they can quickly scramble it together. So for marketing these programs, we were actually approached by a company called KidPass around May, and KidPass is a company that offers a subscription service to parents, and they can basically just have a whole access to an array of virtual programming. So we didn't have much of a virtual audience yet. Our museum's turning 10 years old this coming year. So we didn't have much of a virtual audience, and I thought that maybe this would be a good way to have kind of a built-in audience that was looking for virtual content. So given that we thought we were going to get a lot of people from KidPass, we didn't do a lot of our normal marketing strategies, like posting on community calendars, Mommy Poppins, Community Kangaroo, things like that. But we did push the programs very heavily on social media. So in the end, we wound up with 4 unique preschool programs that we were offering once a week. And then we did that for 4 weeks, stopped, took a break, and then offered the same 4 programs again. So, and then as we started to see people signing up for the preschool programs, we thought, well, maybe we should offer something for the older kids too. So I used that one adapted school program and then added a completely new program for ages 7 to 12. And we would do that once, alternate every other week throughout the summer. So how did it go? Well, the virtual tours, they had good initial views. We were getting good questions. We were getting unique visitors every time, but we did notice that numbers were starting to fall as time went on. Again, Zoom fatigue also, things had started kind of opening back up in the summer, so people had other options. If things do keep closing back down, I think we might bring the virtual tours back, but we decided once our museum was able to reopen in July that we were going to suspend those for the time being. The Try It Tuesday videos, those were also really well received. They had a lot of likes, they had a lot of views, but unfortunately, even though in every video I asked people to, share a picture or comment if they tried the activity at home, we only had like 2 people ever do that. So it was hard to know if any of the kids were actually getting to use the program, or if it was just parents going, oh, cool, I'm glad they're offering something, so we weren't sure if we were really getting to our target audience. Now, the preschool summer series, on the other hand, obviously we had less kids than last year, but everyone or nearly everyone that we talked to really loved the program. So they were very engaged. They either told us they loved the program, they attended multiple sessions. In some cases, we actually had a couple of families come to the museum, the physical museum, when we reopened after having attended one of the classes. And we actually saw that we were getting new audiences. We only had a couple of families that had previously participated in 2019. A lot of people were finding us for the first time, some of them further away in Massachusetts, some of them out of state. We had New York, Florida. So we were getting some new audiences, which was really neat. And also with all this great feedback, it really helped us in adapting the rest of the school programs over the summer. So as far as income goes, we, funny enough, we actually ended up getting about the same income for these programs because previously we had been just doing suggested donation, and this time we were doing a set fee of $4 or $5 depending on the program. So even though we had less students, we actually ended up with about the same monetary income, and we were spending less on materials because instead of needing to provide craft materials for 30 kids a session, it was just materials for me to do the demonstration. So that was something interesting as well. As far as the advertising was concerned, KidPass was kind of a bust. I don't know if it was just that there were too many other virtual classes to compete with, but very few of our participants were finding us via KidPass. Most of them found us through just searching Eventbrite or via our social media posts. So some of my key takeaways, especially from the preschool session, something we already know, keep it fun, keep it dynamic, and keep it interactive. These are things we all know, as I said, but it is very easy to slip back into lecturing when you're staring at a screen. But there really are ways that we can keep things interesting, right? One thing that I have found in my Simple Machines program is really good is simply to break out the big wrench. You gotta have some kind of object that you can just bring in that's gonna immediately draw their focus and, oh, all of a sudden everybody's looking at me again, and that's great. People love our objects, and now they can actually see them pretty up close with our cameras here. So that's awesome. Now, while you do want to change up your screen, I like to have a lot of things on the table and then bring them in, bring them back out. So it's always what's going to be coming next. Another thing you can do is simply alternate between sharing your screen and sharing your video just to get that visual change up. One thing I will say though is try not to get too flashy with technology. One time I did use our clicking walkthrough tour with a younger audience, and he was really fixated on how were we flying through the museum rooms, and I don't understand, and are we ghosts, and so technology is great, but only if it's not going to completely derail your class. So my next key takeaway is about setting the expectation for active engagement. Whether that's in the beginning when you're advertising the program, saying, this is not a video. We're going to have a class where I'm going to ask you to do things and you're going to respond. Obviously, we all know the basics of, have them type in the chat or have them unmute to answer a question. But there are also really easy things you can do, like, hey, give me a thumbs up or thumbs down if this. One thing I like to do is send kids out into their environment to report back. So in our Simple Machines program, I'll be like, okay, go find an example of a lever in the room that you're in, and then tell me about it. So there are a lot of different things like that that are easy, especially even for kids who don't want to unmute, things that are visual, things that you can see them doing. Are really great. We have one program where we will have kids move like a molecule when we talk about the 3 states of matter. So, I'll shout out, move like a book, and we'll be nice, straight and tight like a book, or move like a cup of water, and we're loosey-goosey, and you can see that they're doing that. And another great thing is that we can make it personal. We actually have access to their names. When we have people on Zoom, I can say, hey, Mike, great job. I can see you're coloring your sky purple. What a great choice. Or, wow, Jamie, way to move like a gas bubble there. That's great. You can see what they're doing. And by calling on their names and by validating their participation, they feel like they're there. They're not just lost in a sea of faces. So finally, for that point, I would say just be extra excited. I like to say, kids TV presenter level excited, because they're not getting the same sensory input that they would if they were here in the museum. They're not seeing your body language. So anything you can do to make them feel more excited and that we are here to have a good time, the better. So my final takeaway is just to be clear about what you're offering, which I already said, but it's so important. Talking about the target ages for the program so that kids aren't disappointed or immediately like, oh, this is for preschoolers, or, oh, I don't know what's going on here. And also the time needed. I found that a lot of kids were coming to my program from either other Zoom calls or they needed to leave my call to go to another call. So definitely be upfront about how long your program is going to be and try to be accurate. If it's going to be 30 minutes, keep it 30 minutes, not 40 minutes. And then also, again, keep those materials basic and have a backup plan. So one example of this, we recently did a Halloween program, and we actually had an in-person limited ticketed session, and we had a virtual session. Both event pages got about the same number of views. However, our in-person event completely sold out, and our virtual got 0 signups. And I think part of that is because we were making slime. As you can see, the folks who came to the in-person had a blast making their slime, but I think a lot of parents were thinking, I don't know if I want to make slime at home. And you certainly don't necessarily just have the ingredients for slime laying around. So I think if we had chosen a different craft, we might have had a different audience. One thing we're going to be experimenting come the winter break is doing kind of a hybrid where we do offer curbside pickup for a virtual program. So we're going to have kits of more unique materials ready. People can come to the museum, pick them up, and then choose to do that virtual program. So we'll see if that makes a difference or not. So finally, one last point about being clear about what you're offering is if you want parental supervision, definitely be clear about that in your advertising, because some kids, some parents want to work along with their kids or watch them interact, but some parents just want to have their kids sit in front of stream so they can go do their housework or do their real work, and that's fine. But if you're going to have something like, cutting something intricately, or, poking a hole through a paper cup, and it's going to be younger kids, definitely make it clear if you want parents to be there. Now, they still might not be there, but at least you've set that expectation. And just being flexible is super important. So for example, one time I had a young girl who was, a preschooler, and she almost had a meltdown because she couldn't cut in a circle, or really she thought she couldn't cut in a circle. I know she could. So her parents weren't with her, but we decided that, you know what, if we're making a pulley, it doesn't have to have round sides, it can have rectangular sides. And so we just decided to cut our sheet in half, and then we had our rectangular sides for our pulley. So just being really flexible, super important. So that's about it for me. I'm going to pass it back to Amanda, and we can move on to our next speaker.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Tracy. The big wrench worked, because I even found my own eyes drifting to the Whova app, and all of a sudden the big wrench came up and exactly what it needed to do. So bravo. And so that shifts us to our final speaker, last but certainly not least. We're going to hear from Jenny Powers and learn a little bit more about how she pivoted her in-person special events to virtual. Take it away, Jenny.
Thanks, Amanda. So just a little bit about the museums so that you can get a sense of the setting is that we are one campus of 5 museums. We have 2 art museums, a science museum, a history museum, and the Amazing World of Dr. Seuss. So we have a lot of galleries, we have a lot of rooms, we have a lot of outdoor space as well. And so before COVID, we were doing about 30 special events per year. Those would be spread out throughout all the different seasons, including school vacations and lots of weekend family fun as well. And then we would do a solid 30 days of programming in the summer as well. Our overall budget for supplies and contract staffing was about $52,000, and the contract staffing would include people like costume characters. Of course, we have the Cat in the Hat here, visiting artists, theatrical performers. We do have a 280-seat theater, which can be very popular for magic shows, puppet shows, that sort of thing. And then also we would have strolling performers, whether they be circus actors, they could be balloon sculptors, or even face painters, things like that. We love to create events that are huge parties and that have something going on almost everywhere. And those have always been really well attended. So the biggest event we had last year was a little bit over 2,100 people. That was our Halloween event that we did trick-or-treating across our campus. And then what we had for staffing was, there's me, the one full-time coordinator. We have one 15-hour per week museum educator, and then we have 3 occasional educators that really only come in for these big special events. And I think I could speak for all of us when I said what we really love is full museums. That's me with the purple hair, by the way. We all decided to be the Clue characters. So early COVID effects. Our last special event was our annual Dr. Seuss birthday party. That was on March 7th. We had a little over 1,800 people in attendance. You can see our picture. We had a graphic note taker helping families make this huge collage wall. We had activities spread all over campus, like 30 different hands-on activity stations. Little did we know, 6 days later, we'd be closed. So we closed down, that was a Saturday, we closed down the Friday afterward. Almost right away, we were in the budget planning stage again. And so the budget for family engagement was cut down to about half of what it had been. And even though it was half of what it was, and honestly, that still seems remarkably high, I'm trying to really not spend anywhere near that. Springfield Museums was incredibly lucky in that we had no layoffs and no furloughs. Half of the team, the family engagement team, resigned because they either had health concerns or were caring for someone with health concerns. So we thought that some of our team might get reassigned, but luckily they didn't. We got to keep the staff that was left. Immediately, all of our in-person events were canceled. And like many of you, I still thought, well, maybe I'll plan for summer. We'll probably be open by then. And of course, Springfield Museums is open, but we are not allowed to have groups of more than, I think it's more than 50, and only 10 of them can be close together. So right away, we tried to jump into trying some virtual events because we really want to retain our audience. We want to remind people that we're here. And we also wanted to take some stabs at generating some revenue that way. So our early attempts at special events, our early attempt at virtual programming at all was mostly PDF activities designed to be done with materials kids would have at home and based on our current special exhibits. So some would be art, some would be science. This activity that you see on the screen that says sweet at the top was based on an exhibit that we had here at the museums that we thought maybe people would be able to come back to. Unfortunately, it closed before we reopened. So then our first attempt to try a virtual event where we already had something scheduled was April school vacation week. Now, doing this was extremely short notice. And so there were a lot of problems, but every day I would come up with some new dinosaur activities, mostly adapted from what we were trying to do in person. And I would send them over to our web designer who would quickly put them together and then put them on our webpage. This was such short notice that I was pretty much sending her all these materials only 2 days out. So I would send her Google Slides, she would make PDFs out of them. And there were so many things we hadn't even thought about. For instance, I didn't realize that some of the images I was sending her were actually copyrighted and we couldn't use them. So then she'd have to go to a database of clip art to try to replace it with something else. So that was a struggle. But we got through it and it was actually pretty fun. I would say though that that was the last time that I tried to make something that we would have done in person the same online. After that, we realized virtual programs are their own thing. Don't try to adapt. You can use some of the same ideas, but since it's a completely different animal, don't try to make it fit in the same box. So our Wacky and Wild Susian Science Festival was our next attempt. And this was a fully planned virtual day with notice and lots of time to work on it. And we decided that we would try to generate revenue by having people pay to go to this. I had actually been to a session through NEMO with Erin when she talked about how successful one of their paid programs had been. So I thought, okay, this is it, we're gonna do it. So the obstacles we faced for the Susian Science Festival were we had little to no technology here at Springfield Museums and no virtual audience and some staff reluctance to try to help build those things up. So we tried to partner with a bunch of people in our community that we had partnered with in the past in person. Some of those people really just did not come through for us, were how they said they would. Or in some cases, what the partners were producing was so incredibly low quality, it just shouldn't have been used. It was not good. They clearly didn't have the tech or the experience either. We decided we would charge $5 per family. The average family size we get in person is 3 people. And so we thought, okay, well, it'll be about $5 for every 3 people. We had several live events across multiple platforms. We used Facebook, Instagram, things like that to try to generate the fear of missing out so that if you weren't there for that live event, you would miss it. And then we had a bunch, again, of the printable PDFs like we'd used before, and we had some recorded videos. So this is where we ran into, I'm going to say, thank goodness we had one more person here than we needed, because if you haven't done live on every platform, or even if you have, it doesn't always go as easily as you think. We did too many, so we had to run from place to place. And at Springfield Museums, we do not have campus-wide Wi-Fi. So we had to have Wi-Fi drops, and we ended up having to rip one off the wall somewhere else and bring it down to WeWare to get all of this to happen. So that was not easy. And I have to say, we did not do a great job generating revenue. I think the number of families who attended this and paid the $5 were in the single digits. So, lessons learned and on to the next event. Finally, we had some success and some revenue. So yay! So we reopened the museum in early July. We've had the numbers fluctuate a little bit, but about 25 to 35% of attendance, which is really what we're allowed to have here. This time, when we did our Hooray for Heroes event, we decided we would make a coordinated activity kit of things that families could do at home. We had done one activity kit previously, not connected to any special event, but this one sold better than the first. Now, on these activity kits, a little secret is we're using mostly stuff we already had to fill these. And so the cost was very low. It was a lot of work for staff, but we were selling them at $35 for the first child and $10 for additional siblings. So that's really where the deal is, where you want enough for 2 children. And that's what we sold most of. So once we got to this point, that was where the money was in the kits, not in the virtual programming. There was no charge for the virtual programming. For this event, we also went special exhibits based, and we had, instead of single digits, 734 unique clicks on launch date. We also had people coming back over and over again to keep doing the activities. Now, we did have a donate button, and we did have a survey link on this event, and the number of people who participated in those 2 aspects was 0. We received no donations and we received no feedback. For the first time ever, I did a social media takeover for the day instead of trying to do all those live events. I learned a lot about how much I should appreciate social media staff, since I had no idea what I was doing. I got a quick tutorial the day before, and luckily that carried me through. But let us please shout out all our coworkers who are in social media. We love you guys. So the last virtual event we've had so far was called Into the Autumn Mist, Fairies and Fantasy. We did sell some kits for this as well, but not as many. This took place after kids were back in school and there wasn't the desperation for what to do with them. So we do have some kits left over in case anyone wants one. We also coordinated our first in-person event to go with this. It was an outdoor event where we built fairy houses out on our quadrangle. The museum is so full today, is what several security guards said to me. And I think that they have forgotten our old lives of 2,100 people in the museums, because we had just over 280 people that day, but it was considered a huge success. It was the most people we'd had so far. So I'm really looking forward to going back to those big numbers, but I'll take that as a win for now. One of the things that really surprised me about this event was that we contracted through a grant we had the most popular puppet show that we have here at the museum. This group will fill our 280-seat theater. They're called Tanglewood Marionettes, and they do beautiful, just beautiful work. They're out of Ware, Massachusetts. And they did not get very many views for their presentation that we did online. And just with this is a group we can have back in person an infinite number of times and still get a great audience. So I was surprised that not as many people wanted to watch their show online. So advice that I would give to other museums, less is more. The main lesson I learned from that first Susie and Science Festival was that we do not need, 12 videos, 15 PDFs, and all of that in order to have a nice virtual event. That was overkill, and it's better to have one piece of quality programming than trying to do everything and not having that quality there. Videos that are over 10 minutes do not get watched. Hey, this is true for me when I'm at home watching YouTube too. I don't watch videos longer than that, and neither do people at home. So I definitely recommend inviting partners. We did have some come through, but what I'm doing going forward is I'm not counting on them, and I'm not advertising what they're providing as part of the event. For people who come, it will be an awesome surprise, but I'm not going to do that because I just need to be able to judge what I get before I put it out on our website. Also, clarifying the platforms and the formats is essential for the partners. We were making too many assumptions early on. Knowing the rules and how to access for social media takeover, Like I said, I gave that shout out to my friends because I had no idea how to do that. That was really fun. That did go well. There was a lot of humor, but just make sure that the person who's doing it knows what they're doing. So we also were able to take some grant money that was meant for in-person events and adapt it. And if you're not sure if you can, it doesn't hurt to ask. No one has said no to me so far. I do recommend the live interactions. People love to be able to ask questions and give feedback that way. The printables, when you're doing an art project, if there's a printable, people really like that too. As you can see on the screen now, you could cut a ghost or a fairy out of that printable there. And then having one person here that was more than we thought we needed, who could handle any emergencies, like I mentioned, ripping the router off the wall in a different gallery is a really good idea, because you don't know what's going to hit you, and you can't host a live event and troubleshoot for someone else at the same time. There's only one of you. So I would highly recommend planning more than you think you need, even if it's just by one person. And Amanda, I'm all set.
Excellent. Great job, Jenny. So you can stop sharing your screen for me and we will shift into Q&A. So first of all, can we do like a virtual round of applause for these amazing presentations? Lots of hand clapping. Yes. Rounds of applause. Yes. Loving that. Awesome. Yeah, that was fabulous, Jenny, and everyone else. Thank you so much for sharing your ideas. So we have about 14 minutes left in our session today. And so I'm going to pass things over to my fabulous co-facilitator, Erin, who is going to pass some questions off to the group. As you've seen, our speakers have been awesome about answering questions that have come up in the Q&A, and they're going to continue to do that for the next couple of minutes in our session. But Erin's going to bring up some whole group questions as well.
Yes, thank you to all of the panelists. All of you do such amazing work. You already know how Amanda and I feel about your work, but I'm just so excited that you got to share it with everybody else. So we have a couple of different categories of questions, and one of the ones I want to get out of the way, because they'll be relatively quick answers, have to do more with logistics and tech. So what I would like to do is to throw out a single question and have you answer in order that you presented, just a very quick, short answer. And again, as Amanda said, some of the speakers have already responded to some of the questions in the Q&A section of the Whova app. But this is for everybody, and just to clarify anything. So really quick, for your type of program, what is the price and what was the reaction? What type of reaction were you getting? So let's start with Frank.
The price we're settling on is $125 per program, but for the first 2 months it was free, and we've been full up with those free ones. So it's a wait and see right now to see how it turns out. There are some after that, but the number drops off, but it's also Christmas, and it's hard to tell exactly what the response is so far.
For us, we charge for our adult programs $5 for members, $10 for non-members. But we try to still do free programming because of COVID and the financial strain that we know it has on our attendees and everything of that nature. We also still try to do free adult programs.
What kind of reaction did you get to charging?
Since I've been here, I haven't really gotten any bad feedback. People have been pretty good with, not good, but they don't really seem to mind. I think that is something that we should follow up and ask. How is the pricing for everyone? Do they see is reasonable, or are they like, maybe I want that to be a bit cheaper?
So for our family programs, we've been charging anywhere between $4 and $5 per child. And that's actually the same as the rate that we charge for our school programs. Generally, the most we'll charge for a school program is $7 per student. We haven't had any negative reactions to charging for our family programs. We are going to be, as I mentioned, introducing the idea of a curbside pickup kit. And so for the kit, which it's not going to be a big kit, it's for a candy engineering workshop. So it's just basically a box full of candy. but we're going to be charging $10 for the program with the kit and $4 without the kit. So we'll see how that goes.
One thing that I neglected to mention about our virtual events is that they were sponsored. And so we did have some revenue there, but at the moment for this era of virtual programming, we're not charging. We also have museum school classes that are being charged for, and we have school programs that are being charged for, but for our general special events, we're not going to charge anymore. Most people in the area are able to come for free if they live in Springfield, and they're not going to pay to come have something they can usually get for free. And then the surrounding towns, we just didn't get attendance for when we charged.
Okay, thank you. So this next one will be rapid fire responses as well. This very quickly, again, in the order that you presented, if you can just share the platform that you used for any type of, if you did any pre-recorded videos, and then the platform that you're using for live programs.
For our live programs, we're doing everything through Zoom right now. We had looked at Google Meet or other things that schools were using, but we decided to stay with Zoom for now. For our recorded videos, we're just recording the videos for now, and they're short videos, so we're still embedding them into the PowerPoint we're using as our share.
So for our adult programs, we're using, for like the more like live presentations, we use Zoom. For our school programs, we actually go into the classes, Google Classroom, like their Google Meets. And I'm doing our virtual school tours with this program called Esri Story Maps, which is it allows you to incorporate, embed videos, embed images. So we're doing it that way with some pre-recorded videos of other staff members talking in the galleries or the history gallery. And then there's also a live component as well. But that all takes place pretty much either through Zoom and Google Meet. And I think Tasha has something to add about the virtual escape rooms.
So as Rachel said, we use Zoom as our main platform for lectures, presentations of that nature. For the escape room, we use the platform Genially to create the escape room. That's created in-house. I created that using images from or paintings from our collection, and then coming up with puzzles. Some background, I used to work at another museum, and I actually did an in-person escape room for families. So I had some knowledge of how to do escape rooms, like the main structures of it. I also love to do escape rooms, so I had knowledge with that as well. So I kind of, when shifting, I kind of had an idea of what the core should be. So we decided to use Genially because it allows for that interactive components to make puzzles, to also reveal puzzles, if anything, reveal clues of that nature. And it's very hands-off. So participants, what's great about Genially, if you pay the membership fee, you can create a private link, but you can also do the free component where the link would be open to everyone. So we opted in to do the membership, so our link can be free and we can send it to the participants who pay for the program. And so with that, I created Genially with, created the escape room with Genially, but we broadcast it through Zoom. So the participants get the link, they join us, we put the link in the chat function, and with that, they're able to click on it, open it up on their screen. And one of the setbacks, what I've been responding to people with Genially, is that not everyone, so if there's a group of 5, only one person can be the main clicker, is what we say, to pretty much get the game going. But again, trying to keep that idea of people working together, what we do is that we keep the puzzles open. So we might have puzzles like math puzzles where they have to come together and work together, or puzzles where there's a series of steps that they have to do together to make it in. So still trying to keep that idea of people working together to escape. And for that first one, it was escaping paintings that they were trapped in. all that to say, so we use Genially, but we broadcast it through Zoom.
For our family programs, we use Zoom. As I mentioned, we had started using KidPass, which kind of integrates Zoom, much like Huva does here. The trouble with that was that somehow it would sometimes waffle back to the basic mode, so you'd get cut off after 40 minutes randomly. And it also like mandatory had to record the session, which some parents did not like. Obviously, they don't necessarily want their kids to be recorded, and so that was out of our control. Now we just use straight Zoom from our own account. For the virtual tours that we were doing on our social media, we were using Facebook Live, but we also used a free program called OBS Studio, and that allowed us to have both share our screen and have the video of the speaker, the tour guide, in the corner. Otherwise, Facebook Live usually only lets you share one screen. So OBS Studio allowed us to kind of share multiple screens on the same viewer.
We host our videos through YouTube and embed them in our website. And then for most live content, we use Zoom, but we also use social media.
Great, thank you. Tasha, can you drop the Genially, can you spell that out and drop it into the chat for everybody? Just so they know what you're talking about, because I think that may be new to some people. Okay, so a couple of questions that are more general, and whoever would like to jump in, it doesn't need to be that everybody answers, but a couple of things that came to mind to me and then also showed up in the questions is about continuing engagement after COVID. So we have moved to this new area of virtual engagement in ways that many of us didn't or couldn't before. So now the question is, what are your thoughts behind continuing engagement, especially with the new audiences that you were able to reach? So a number of you mentioned that you were reaching people you'd never reached before, which was one of the highlights of what happened during the pandemic. But the other question tied into that is what kind of attendance you are seeing with your virtual programs versus in person. So what is your plan for moving forward with virtual engagement? And then how is that affected by the attendance that you've been seeing? Jenny.
So we would love to be able to continue our virtual engagement after we're able to fully reopen and return to having big parties here again. Just like the other speakers, we noticed that we did get especially kit purchases from all over the country. A lot of our members sending them to their grandchildren, especially. The problem will be that once we do an amazing job ramping back up and building our audience up, is that then we'll have one person doing two jobs. So if we want to continue that virtual engagement in the future and have those in-person programs, it would be a greater need for staffing. At that point, our leadership would have to assess if that was both a worthy value, a worthy use of time and something that we could afford to do.
Yeah, it seems like now is a good time to start advocating for yourself and for what is going to be realistic when you do reopen, especially for places that have small staffs. We're coming up on two minutes until the end of our session. There are many, many more questions, and it looks like the Q&A portion is still very active. We're going to have the speakers stick around to answer some of the questions in that section. So please look there. And for now, Amanda and I are just going to wrap up really quickly to send you on your way with a few pieces of food for thought.
Awesome. Great. Thanks, Erin. So bringing this fabulous session to a close, it seems like some common takeaways from all of our wonderful presenters stem back behind to best practices of in-person museum education. It's funny how the work that we do in person with our visitors is very similar to the work we're now doing virtually. We need to understand our audiences, right? We have to meet them where they are, even on a virtual platform. We have to remember that our programs are not for us or about us. They are about our visitors. We need to make our content accessible. So what does that mean? Is that child's age times 3 minutes, Tracy's awesome formula? Or is that knowing, at the mat at night, cocktails are going to be a great tie-in with your audience. It's about making the content accessible and meeting people where they are, and not drinking content through a fire hose, to paraphrase the great Tilden. And also seeking those aha moments, whether it's a big wrench, or it's an on-site fairy house building experience, or it's empathizing with a mill girl. It really seems like the common threads to all of your work over the last 9 months follow the best practices of in-person museum education. And I think that's really refreshing to hear for all of us. So as you saw in the chat, I dropped a reminder for everyone to please rate this session. You can do that through the Whova app. And we also dropped a survey into the chat as well. And that is for Erin and I to start planning for 2021 as your EdPag chairs. So please fill that out, give us your feedback. And can we have one more round of applause virtually for these fantastic presenters? Thank you all. Thank you, Frank. Thank you, Tasha. Thank you, Rachel. Thank you, Tracy. Thank you, Jenny. Thank you, Erin. And thank you, Nima, for allowing us a way to engage together but separately. Hope you all have a fabulous rest of your conference.
Thanks, everyone. So I'm going to stop the meeting now, and we're going to skedaddle over to a PAG lunch.
All right.
Thanks.
Can we talk? Are we done?
You're still broadcasting right now?
Oh, okay. Hi, everybody. I wanted to say, like, thank you all so much for doing this. This was absolutely fabulous. Please come to the PAG lunch, which I forgot to plug, and we'll all talk soon.
All right. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye, everybody.